So yes, it's time for some more pickups, and I know Super Nintendo has just clicked off the video, but you want to see what games I've been picking up over the last few weeks or so. Now I've had to break it down into categories, and today, well, you're going to get to see some PlayStation 2 games that I've picked up. And yes, there will be some good, there will be some bad, and there will be some ugly. And if you want to see what's coming up, you just wait until after these. So hello friends, and welcome back to Generation Pixel, and thank you for clicking on the video and joining me with these PlayStation 2 pickups. And like I said at the beginning, there will be some good games, some bad games, and some downright ugly games too. Now let's kick it off with one of the categories that I collect for, and that is licensed games on the PlayStation 2, with the game X-Men, the official game. Now, as with all the rest of the games that you're going to see in this pickups video, I haven't played much of X-Men, the official game. One of the driving forces behind my PlayStation 2 collecting habits at the moment is to pick up games that I've never played. Also, of course, to try and find those truly bad games that you just love to hate. Now, with the short time that I've spent with X-Men, the official game, well, I'm afraid to say, yes, it's not a bad game. It's not a terrible game, it's not a great game by any stretch of the imagination, but at least it's a licensed game, and that fits nicely into that niche of my particular collection. The game itself seems to be a competent 3D beat 'em up, a PlayStation 2 era of Streets of Rage or perhaps Final Fight, but as I said, it's not too bad. It's one that I'll probably sit down and try and play through more, because I've only just skimmed the surface of this one at the moment. But that's X-Men, the official game, into the collection where it will stay forever. Now next up, it's a game pretty much in the same vein, because it's Justice League Heroes, another licensed superhero game that is another street brawler. Unlike X-Men, the official game, however, this one is slightly different. It's more of a top-down isometric view of the battle, and in many ways much more arcadey. This is one you probably have fun sitting down and playing with friends over a few beers, but it didn't come across as a game that you would get overly serious about. Graphically, it looks okay, the sound's not too bad, and I quite like the fact that as Superman you can pick up the cars and trucks around you and use them as weapons. So that is Justice League Heroes coming into the collection where it will stay forever. Now next up is another licensed game, and I didn't pick this one up because it's a licensed game. Well, not only because it's a licensed game, but I picked it up quite simply because it's Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring, and I'm after that Lord of the Rings subset. Now, I was quite surprised when I threw this one on to get some gameplay for it, because it's not exactly what I expected it to be. Despite my absolute passion for Lord of the Rings, the Lord of the Ring games are something that I have never really delved into. But somehow I had the impression that the Lord of the Rings games that came out about this time were all hack and slash beat 'em ups, often considered brutally hard and a bit janky when it comes to the controls. With the Fellowship of the Ring, however, it's not like that at all. Well, not what I experienced of the game anyway, because it seems more like an action RPG of sorts. So this is one that I'll definitely sit down and put some time into. Now, I didn't really enjoy what I played of the first hour or so, but that was mainly due to how the camera functions in this game, because the camera doesn't invert and I have to use up for up and down for down on the camera, and that's just not right. But Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring, the official game, is coming into the collection where it will stay with the rest of the Lord of the Ring games that are up there. Now next up is not one game, not two games, but three games that I've picked up, and the reason I'm going to show them all together is they're part of a trilogy. They're part of a trilogy that has sort of been forced upon me, or at least the genre has, by back in the day gaming. If you know back in the day gaming, well, you'll know what type of genre he likes to play the most, but the games that he's inspired me to pick up are the time splitter games. And as with the rest of the games that you're going to see today, I haven't put a great deal of time into these, and not because I didn't want to and didn't want to in the past, it's just these are the games that I didn't get round to back then. And on top of that, first person shooters, well, they give me motion sickness, and that's something that you don't want to experience while we are gaming. But the short time that I did put into these games just to record some gameplay footage has confirmed to me why these games were so beloved back in the day and are still beloved today. And albeit just a little bit of gameplay dedicated to each of these games each at the moment, I can see quite clearly the progression that the developers made when they pushed this series forward. And I can quite honestly say that I was impressed with the way these games developed over the series. Well, even just from the short amount of gameplay I gave them. So that's Time Splitters 1, 2 and 3 coming into the collection, where they will stay forevermore. Now next up is another game that's part of a much larger series, and it's just one game this time, but it is the third instalment and it does complete the subset I believe for me, and that's Onimusha 3. Now until I decided to do a little bit of gameplay for this particular instalment, I hadn't played any Onimusha games at all. So let me tell you, I was a tad surprised when Jean Reno popped up and there was machine gun action in a game that I thought was all about feudal Japan, samurai swords and shurikens with zombies. But despite that surprise, and it was quite a nice surprise because I quite enjoyed what I played of this. I will have to go back and play Onimusha 2 and then come on to this one, but I'm looking forward to getting here. So Onimusha 3 into the collection. So next up is a subset game, a game that I've got to have in the collection because it's part of a much bigger collection, and that is Crash of the Titans. So this again is a game that I haven't played much of, only to get some gameplay footage, and let me tell you, the gameplay footage was a little bit strange. Taking Crash out of the 2.5D and into almost 3D, because I don't think it's quite there yet, was a strange experience indeed. But there we have Crash of the Titans into the collection, where it will live beside all the other Crashes up there. Now next up is another subset game, and it's the pinnacle of subsets, probably the most important subset in this particular collection, because it's Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus. Now again, this was a game that I didn't play back in the day, and mainly because it wasn't turn-based JRPG. As much as I adore the Final Fantasy series, even I get a bit upset when it comes to changing the formula. At the time when this game was released, for me personally, if it wasn't going to be traditional turn-based combat, I wasn't going to get invested in it. But you know what, after putting a little bit of time in it, I see this game has some merits. Now you don't think run and gun when it comes to Final Fantasy, but for Vincent, well, that sort of style fits this sort of character. Yes, I can understand why it's not one of the most beloved Final Fantasy games that's out there, but it is kinda nice to see that Square Enix were happy to maybe push the boat out a little bit and do a little bit of experimentation. So that is Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus into the collection. Now next up is the first of two games that I've picked up purely because they're arcade racers, and I don't give enough love to arcade racers. And the first one is Extreme G Racing. Now as with the rest, I haven't put a lot of time into Extreme G Racing, but what I can tell you from what I have played, it's kinda like a very clunky, not very smooth Wipeout. So if you're looking for a game of that genre that isn't Wipeout, then I'm not going to recommend Extreme G Racing from my experience anyway. You might have a different opinion on this particular title, but unfortunately for me, it's a no. And unfortunately, it's not bad enough to be a bad game. But of course, it comes into the collection where it's going to stay as an example of a game of how not to do Wipeout perhaps. So that's Extreme G Racing into the collection. Now the second of these arcade racers that I've picked up is the wonderful Auto Modelista. And on the complete flip side of Extreme G Racing, here we have a game that is worth your while putting some time into. Now I have seen this game played over and over again on YouTube, and it does look fantastic. And let me tell you, in real life, it looks just as good as you imagine it should. The wonderful cel shaded graphics are absolutely beautiful, and the gameplay is buttery smooth as well. It might not be the pinnacle of arcade racers, but for me, playing this with the combination of not only the aesthetics, but the decent gameplay makes this a must have in anyone's collection, especially if you're into arcade racers, and that is Auto Modelista coming into the collection. Now recently on the Pixel Years, I did get to reminisce about Red Baron, that wonderful game from Dynamics on the IBM PCs and of course 16-bit microcomputers of the time that put you into the role of a World War I fighter pilot in a biplane, and I absolutely loved that game. So when I saw this game out in the wild, a game that I'd never seen before, I had to pick it up to compare, and that is World War I Aces of the Sky. Now of course, anytime I play a flight simulator game, one that is set in World War I and a combat flight simulator game, I'm going to compare it to that wonderful Red Baron game that was released all those years ago in 1990. And considering this particular game came out in the 2000s, well, I was hoping for bigger and better things. Now don't get me wrong, it's not too bad of a game, it has decent controls, it has decent enough graphics, it's just not 10 years worth more of decent if you ask me. It is however a semi-decent World War I dogfighting game, and you don't get many of them, and I should know because I look for them all. But that is World War I Aces of the Skies into the collection forever. Now next up are the pickups that some of you have been sitting patiently waiting to see, And this is the not only bad but also ugly. And the first one I'm going to show is another World War I dogfighting game, and that is Red Baron, but this time from Davilex. Now, until recently I knew very little about the publishers Davilex, but after picking up Knight Rider and Knight Rider 2 on the PlayStation 2 only last month, the wonderful Ross at Bahaha said I needed to try more Davilex games, and after a quick search and seeing the title Red Baron, well, I thought it was meant to be. Now, I should have known better because Davilex have a reputation for not only making bad games but fundamentally broken games, and let me tell you, when it comes to Davilex's outing with Red Baron, this is probably one of the worst that I've ever had the displeasure and pleasure of playing. If you ever want to play a fight combat sim where it feels like you're flying a brick through treacle, then perhaps this game is for you. Now, of course, it's Red Baron, it will stay in my collection forever. It is a Davilex game, and it looks like I'm starting to put together a Davilex subset. Pity me if you want, but Red Baron is into the collection. Now, the next game, we are staying with Davilex, because when someone like Ross points out a rabbit hole like Davilex, I'm going to dive in head first and go for it. Now, their early games, or one of their most important early games, was London Racer and Autobahn, a German version of that game. But over here in the UK, there was a game, London Racer, for the PlayStation that eventually got a sequel on the PlayStation 2, London Racer 2. Now, I won't go into too much detail about this game because I am sure there is tons out there in YouTube describing just how bad this game is. Because if I thought it was bad trying to fly a brick through treacle, well then I tried driving a car through treacle on a road of ice. The graphics are truly awful, the controls are jank, this game should never be released, it should never be played, but does it have any redeeming qualities to make it that extra special bad that makes it worth having in your collection? Well, almost, but not quite. On the radio you can listen to this inane chatter from a radio presenter that's obviously trying to mimic the Grand Theft Auto radio presenters of that time, but doing such a bad job of it, even I couldn't bear to listen to the inane babble that was coming out of this idiot's mouth. Now, does that mean it's staying in the collection? Well, of course it's staying in the collection, because this game is truly bad, truly awful, and you should never play it. This is your warning right here, right now, that it's staying in here. If you ever want to see it, either physically or gameplay, come and ask me. Don't get it for yourself, because London Racer 2 is in this collection. So next up is the last Davilex game, and I'm sure you're quite happy to hear that, because we can only take so much Davilex in one video. And the game that I've added to the collection from Davilex is Miami Vice. And yes, without a shadow of a doubt, Miami Vice is the worst Davilex game that I've played so far. And I think some of the reason for that is when you pay for a license like Miami Vice, you expect at least some sort of quality. Yes, we all know that licensed games don't tend to be the very best, but at least they tend to be a little bit more polished. But quite frankly, when it comes to polish, there's absolutely none on Miami Vice. For the very short period that I was brave enough to put some time into this game, I found nothing but clunk and jank. In other words, the game isn't fundamentally broken as such, it just controls really poorly, and there's been no effort put into the level design at all. Well, not from what I could see. I will try and persevere with it and push myself through, because at the beginning you only play as Crockett's, and yes, I want to see if we can play as Tubbs as well, but unfortunately Miami Vice, and I'm giving you a full warning on this one as well, do not pick this one up, do not play this. If you have been kind enough to sit through this video this length of time, I'm doing you that favour. Miami Vice is in this collection, it doesn't need to be anywhere else. Now, next up is a game that I wasn't going to buy for the collection. It's a sports title, and I don't do sports titles unless they're usually a little bit unique. But someone out there in the community, the wonderful Sean at Pompey's Games Room, is putting together a wonderful Royal Rumble in the upcoming year ahead. So I had to buy a game so I could join in, and that game is SmackDown vs Raw 2009. Now, I'll be frankly honest with you, I haven't personally watched wrestling since the mid-90s, so the thought about playing it near 2010 was something that would never have crossed my mind. But as I said, this is a favour game, one of those games that you buy because someone out there would like you to do something. So Sean, over at Pompey's Games Room, thank you for making me buy another wrestling game for the collection, and that's it in there for good now. So there you go, my friends, that's my PlayStation 2 pickups from the last several weeks, and what did you think about them? Were they good? Were they bad? Were they ugly? Were they Davilex? If you want to talk about any of the things that you've seen today, then drop that down into the comments, because the interaction between you
And me, well, that's what makes YouTube special. Thank you so much for watching as always, and until next time, cheerio!